Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Sleep and Weight Loss, 6 Ways Sleep Can Help You Get Slim. My name is Megan Brooks, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at SleepCharge by Fusion Health. And before we dive into our 30-minute presentation, I just wanted to go over some simple housekeeping rules. First of all, this presentation is being recorded and will be sent out to those that have registered. Your lines are muted. However, if you have questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box and we will answer those as time permits. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today, Dr. Jeffrey Dermer. Dr. Dermer is a systems neuroscientist, neurologist, and sleep medicine physician. He is also our co-founder and chief medical officer here at SleepCharge by Fusion Health. And without further ado, Dr. Dermer, you want to get us kicked off?
Okay, thank you, Megan. And thank you all for joining us today. I always love hovering over a picture of me for this long. Let me go to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about today's webinar. Today we're going to talk a little bit about sleep and metabolism and also weight loss. One of the things that we need to talk about before we get into that discussion is a little bit more about fundamentals of sleep so that we're all level set and understanding the same basic things with regards to sleep, and then also why sleep is so important. And that will give us really our foundation to discuss why sleep is so important in terms of metabolism as well as weight loss. And then after we do that, we'll talk a little bit about how we can improve sleep, and I'll give you some tips as well as some basic new habits that you can start to develop. So let's start with the fundamentals of sleep. We talk about this often at SleepCharge, and we also focus on these 3 basic fundamentals of sleep because they're the ones that actually are neuroscientifically known to be the actual reasons for your sleep to be either good or bad on any given night. The first one's sleep duration, or how long you sleep. The second, sleep timing, when you sleep. And the third is sleep quality, how well you sleep. I'll talk quickly about them just so we're all on the same page. Duration, or how long you sleep, is the one that most of us understand. It's also the one that's most often studied. And it reflects the amount of sleep that you actually spend or spend doing that behavior in a 24-hour period. So it includes things like naps and other parts of your day that you may be sleeping. It is very much specific to your age and gender, as well as your own personal sleep history. And this is something that's even connected to your genetics. We know that sleep duration is also one of the most well-researched modifiable risk factors that is associated with many chronic neurologic, metabolic, and cardiovascular diseases. And as the research comes out in large populations, it seems very consistent across the international boundaries. This is a human issue, not a cultural issue, it turns out. Sleep timing, or when you sleep, is another neurologically based component of your sleep system. And this is something that we look at in terms of its regularity, or in most cases, irregularity over a 24-hour period. Again, this is something that is age dependent, as well as based on your health status, whether you have chronic diseases or not, will also be affecting timing of your sleep. And then this is actually a component that is even more genetically predisposed to a specific individual's family history than anything else that we know about your sleep. So when you go to sleep, when you inherit. Sleep timing is also something that we talk about as circadian timing. And this is, circadian is a word that means around the day, or around a 24-hour day. And this is the timing of when you have this behavior of sleep and when you wake also supports the cardiovascular, metabolic, mental, and immune health. Increases the chances of having disorders in these categories. The last fundamental of sleep is sleep quality. An awful lot in sleep and circadian neurobiology, but it's not one that is easily understood by you as a person or me when I sleep. because you're asleep. You don't know the quality of your sleep until after it occurs oftentimes. But one of the most important fundamentals of sleep, because it reflects how non-REM stages and how interrupted or not interrupted it is by things like sleep disorders or disturbances to your sleep. There are genetic and environmental components to sleep quality, so there are things we inherit that make our quality better or worse. But the environment itself can be a major determinant of that. If anybody here has had kids running into your bedroom in the middle of the night, or pets, that can be a major issue in terms of your quality of sleep. And then general health itself contributes to your sleep quality across the lifespan. The night-to-night variability of quality is something that we often talk about, as well as its relation to common sleep disorders that often go unnoticed or undiagnosed for many years. And these often lead to the physical, mental, and emotional problems that we associate with poor sleep. So quality itself has a lot of medical as well as psychiatric and emotional health components to it. So that's a good little grounding in terms of the neuroscience behind sleep and why what our sleep is, the components of our sleep. But let's talk about why it matters. And you can start from the macro picture, the big picture. Sleep matters to everyone. It matters to countries, it turns out, as this study showed in 2017, where they were able to determine the effect of sleep deprivation in different cultures around the world, and not only its effect on individuals, but really its effect on gross domestic product. As it turns out that people who are sleep deprived actually cost a lot more and actually create problems in the workplace and accidents and things that impact the bottom line of countries. And as you can see here, it's a pretty large number for us here in the United States. $411 billion worth of sleep deprivation cost associated with our GDP. That's about 2.28%, as you see on the map. But it's not just us; it's other countries as well. Even though we look like we're leading the pack there on the right-hand side of the bar graph, as a percentage, we're about in line with Japan, and almost similar to the UK, Germany, and a little bit behind or ahead of Canada as well. So these are things that are cross-cultural and that affect us in a very large way. When we look at it in terms of the specifics of a person themselves being sleep deprived and its effect on you, this is where it gets a little bit more personal. And this is an image that shows, it's a functional image showing the brain activity in a regions of someone who is doing an activity. And this is actually someone doing serial subtraction. So they started with 100 and subtract 3, went to 97, 94, and then continued from there. That shows in the brain when someone is not sleep deprived, but when they're getting adequate sleep, areas of the brain that become active. So those are the areas of the brain we know that do that function. Over the course of time, if you don't let somebody sleep and just keep them awake beyond their normal 15 hours of wakefulness, put them back into the functional magnetic resonance imaging magnet and scan their brain while they're doing the same tasks, and you'll find that the areas of the brain that normally serve that function are no longer active. And that means that other areas of the brain, the parts of the brain that actually are not designed to do this, become active to try to compensate. And that's why we become less accurate. We have lost performance despite still being awake, trying to provide to do these behaviors. So your brain actually is still functioning when you're sleep deprived, but it's not using the A team. You're using your bench warmers for serial subtraction and other functions as well. The effect on your body is also something, and that's something we need to talk about, because we're gonna jump off from here and talk a little bit about one of these specific effects, which is the loss of regulation in terms of your metabolism and weight gain. Because what we know is just after one night of sleep deprivation, one of the very first things that happens to someone is they lose their hormone appetite regulation, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail in a little bit about that. But that's a very a major effect, and it happens quite quickly with only one night of sleep deprivation. In addition, with one night of sleep deprivation or poor night of sleep, toxic waste products build up in the brain and damage neurons. And now this is an area of active research where we know that people who have sleep deprivation for one of the three different reasons, duration, timing, or quality, are actually at more risk for things like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, and diseases that are caused by neural damage over time. And then if you're continuously not sleeping well over the course of many, many nights, what we know that does is increases your risk for death as well as high as 4 times for all causes, for falling off a ladder, having a heart attack, or having a driving accident. And then the last part of this is how much it accelerates chronic diseases. We know that obesity jumps up very, very high in populations who are not sleeping well on a regular basis. And we even know that things like cancer may increase in these populations. So chronic diseases themselves is a broad category. There's not one, they're all quite various, but the one we're going to focus on today is obesity. And just as an example, I wanted to show you over on the right-hand side that people with actual sleep disorders, and this is people diagnosed with sleep apnea in particular, there are far more people with sleep apnea in these different condition states. And I'll just focus on type 2 diabetes here. So if you look at folks with type 2 diabetes, up to 72% of individuals in that group have sleep disordered breathing and sleep disorders that actually are causing or participating in making their diabetes worse. We know that same thing is true with obesity itself. 77% of people who are considered obese with a body mass index over 30 are also people that have sleep apnea and sleep disorders to a much higher extent, 77% of them, compared to folks who don't have obesity. And the same thing's true with heart failure, metabolic syndrome, as you can see around the picture here. A very high number of folks with these conditions have a sleep disorder. And the biggest issue that we know about in sleep medicine, this is why SleepCharge was developed, is that 80% of those people with these disorders, these sleep disorders, are undiagnosed. In other words, they're walking around not knowing that they have a sleep disorder they could treat and actually control their depression, their AFib, their obesity. So we're going to talk about obesity today. And we're going to start with the understanding about sleep metabolism and then get into weight loss. The first thing is it's important to know that even since the 1960s, we've been really measuring the sleep duration of our population as the United States. And we've also been measuring the body mass index of our population. And there's a very interesting graph that I pulled here from a 2005 publication. And then I extended this data set out with the red lines, as you can see, to our current or up-to-date 2015 figures. And what this shows is in the diamonds, the actual sleep time, number of hours on average that Americans were getting back in the 1960s. There's around 8.5 hours a night. And since the 1960s, all the way through the 1980s, we see a decrease to about 8 hours, then a real drop between the 80s and the 90s to around 7 hours. And that's continued to today. The average is around 6.1 or 6.2 hours of sleep for American adults. That drop, a very precipitous drop in a very short period of time relative to the overall existence of Americans, has also been paralleled by an unprecedented increase in obesity in our population. You can see the obesity epidemic really starting after the 1990s, and then since then has really dramatically increased in our population to well over 35%, maybe even 37 or 8% of our population now considered obese. And that's not even looking at overweight, that's just obese. So there's a correlation here. There's a correlation between sleep loss and obesity rise. And that correlation has actually been demonstrated in a number of research studies in the recent past. In 2013, in particular, there was a pivotal study that was done at the University of Pennsylvania showing that people who are sleep deprived in a laboratory actually, that sleep deprivation or sleep restriction causes them to eat more and gain weight. So it's a one-to-one relationship, a direct relationship, that people who are sleep deprived have a much higher amount of calories consumed than people who are not sleep deprived as comparison, and even compared to themselves. So there's a real drive to eat and gain weight when you're sleep deprived, which kind of goes back to our large population picture on the left. Another study that I thought was quite interesting that falls into the same discussion here is that when you look at actually sleep quality issues, like people with sleep apnea, there have been studies looking at actual visceral fat content. So this is a CT scan over here on the right-hand side of an individual. This is their abdomen. And so in the abdomen, you can actually quantify with serial CT scans exactly how much fat they have under their skin, called subcutaneous fat, but also the fat that's inside your body, or visceral fat, which is actually the fat that lives around your organs. And that turns out to be one of the most dangerous types of fat to have in your body, increases your risk for a lot of cardiometabolic disease. And what they found is that people with sleep apnea, when people with sleep apnea were treated with CPAP, which is a device that keeps the airway open so they don't have apnea, they oftentimes lose weight. But the most important thing, and this is showing somebody here who went from 70 to 71 kilograms, actually didn't lose weight, ended up gaining 1 pound. Same thing here happened to a person. They put them on CPAP and they showed that they went from 80 kilograms to 76 kilograms, so they did lose weight. So there was some weight loss in some people, but not in everyone. But the one thing they did find was even those who didn't lose weight, the composition of their visceral fat went down. In other words, even if you don't lose weight and treat your sleep quality issue, you do reduce some of the visceral fat that actually is leading to disease. So weight gain itself, or weight loss itself, may be helped by getting rid of a sleep quality issue, but the most important part is you're getting rid of some of the elements that cause disease, which is that visceral fat. Interesting study. So let's talk about duration, timing, and quality as it relates to driving, eating, and obesity. First thing to know is that short sleep duration is well known now to be a stimulator of appetite hormones, those two being leptin and ghrelin. And it turns out that those stimulations actually increase the amount of ghrelin that's produced, which makes you hungry, and reduces the leptin contact, which is what makes you feel like you're full. So the ratio flips between ghrelin and leptin by around 70%. And that's what these graphs up here show, that leptin itself increases after 2 days of being, leptin decreases here in purple compared to the green. The group in the purple actually has a decrease in their leptin, which is the signal that says, hey, you don't need to eat, comes from your fat cells. It goes down. But the ghrelin level after being sleep deprived increases over here in the purple in response to being sleep deprived. And this is after 2 days of just getting 4 hours of sleep a night. And that change, that leptin and ghrelin change, has been quantified compared to starvation, where they actually do starvation studies for 3 days. And they found that the leptin and ghrelin change is equivalent in just one night, just after 2 nights of sleep restriction, to 3 days of total starvation. So no wonder people who are sleep deprived are driven to eat and gain weight, because your hormones that mitigate this and that change your appetite are deranged when you're sleep deprived. Control obesity, as well as a number of other downstream effects. The most important here being metabolic syndrome. And the reason I bring up metabolic syndrome is because it's part of obesity, but it's also all the other effects like hypertension and insulin insensitivity that leads to diabetes, and a number of really premorbid diseases that lead to stroke and terminal problems that can actually increase your chances of dying. And that's an area that of active research that we're looking at what 1 hour of sleep loss actually does in terms of your ability to lose weight as well. And this is a recent research study that was quite interesting, 2008, showing that when people were put on a caloric restriction diet, in other words, eating less to lose weight, they found that people that lost weight actually lost not body fat, but lost, when they're sleep deprived, they didn't lose body fat, they lost other constituents of their body. So this kind of relates back to those CT scans that when we corrected sleep quality issues, body fat went away. In other words, their sleep got better and their body fat went down. In this study, it showed that when they put people on a diet to reduce calories, they had one group that was sleep deprived and another that maintained their normal sleep. And it turned out that the sleep deprivation group, just 1 hour of less sleep, really reduced their ability to lose body fat, even on a restricted caloric diet over weeks. And that's what this graph up here shows, that basically the average sleep restricted group itself compared to the group that had a baseline sleep time body fat that the other group lost. So if you're dieting, in other words, don't be sleep deprived, because you won't be able to lose fat. Let's look at sleep timing. Sleep timing itself is mitigated or created by a pacemaker in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN. This part of the brain, it orchestrates all of the metabolism in your nervous system that controls fat cell production, blood glucose production called gluconeogenesis, and inflammatory markers that circulate throughout your body. We know that that SCN here in the middle of the brain, it controls the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. This is very important because by managing to reduce sympathetic nervous system activity at night and increase parasympathetic to a more sensitive insulin receptor system, it leads to a more sensitive metabolism of glucose, so that during the day you're managing your glucose well, and you're not making too much glucose and you're not making too much fat cells. You're actually helping to regulate those processes. So people who are on shifts, for instance, who we've studied that don't have this regular timing of sleep are noted risks. And this is, we think, believed to be because their timing of sleep directly impairs the genetics in their brain that cause blood glucose levels to be controlled, fat cell control, and as well as the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system control, leading to resetting of the glucose system at night. So timing itself has a direct impact on your metabolism and the nervous system control and genetic control of your metabolism that leads to potential weight gain. Last one is sleep quality, and we talked a little bit about this earlier with the CT scans, but I wanted to give you a little bit more information about this, that even a single night of sleep deprivation, which we've all had from time to time, or just a night of poor sleep, that actually has a major effect on your insulin sensitivity. It turns out about 25% reduction in your insulin sensitivity just by having a poor night of sleep. It also reduces your glucose tolerance by 23%, meaning it doesn't allow you to manage your glucose during the day. And this is something that did not pass the kidney and diabetes specialists without notice, because in 2008, there was a publication in the Diabetes Research Clinical Practice Journal, and that's this image on the right-hand side, where they were very explicit in making the point that obesity metabolism itself is something that specifically sleep apnea, but in more general terms now, we have a lot more data since this time, sleep fragmentation itself, a component of sleep apnea, leads to and actually causes glucose intolerance and type 2 diabetes. Now, that's something to be afraid of, first of all, just because type 2 diabetes is an issue that we've been seeing grow within the country year to year. But the biggest issue here, the bigger issue for you all, is that this is one of the stimulators of weight gain. So getting to type 2 diabetes is the long-term thing we want to avoid, but even in the short term, sympathetic overactivation, remember that area of the brain that becomes too active when you're sleep deprived or your timing's off, that's something that even quality issues and fragmentation can impact. Same thing with cortisol levels that cause body fat to accumulate. And then a number of other pathways, including leptin and ghrelin, as we mentioned earlier, are activated inappropriately when people have quality issues like sleep apnea or fragmentation due to insomnia or even restless leg syndrome. And that promotes a lot of downstream medical problems, but specifically weight gain. And that's what we're going to try to get you some ways to control, get you some concepts here to control that weight gain. So kind of distilled it down to 6 things. If you can focus on your sleep duration, timing, and quality itself, you can lower your risk of weight gain and actually help yourself lose weight if you're trying to lose weight, or maintain your weight if that's what you're trying to do. The first one is keep those appetite hormones, the leptin and ghrelin itself, under control, and do it by eliminating sleep deprivation. And sleep deprivation is an effect of both duration, timing, and quality of all of those. So keep an eye on your sleep deprivation. You can start by looking at duration and timing, and then if that's not an issue, quality might be one of the problems you're dealing with. By improving your sleep duration, which is number 2, by at least about 7 hours on average every night, you actually will help your brain also make good food choices. Some data suggests that actually what you look at and feel as tempting, your appetite itself, you're drawn to specific types of food, that is related to sleep duration. So if you're not getting enough sleep, that actually causes you to make poor choices in terms of foods where you actually end up with higher caloric, lower energy value foods that cause weight gain. Number 3 is you want to change your metabolism by directly addressing your sleep quality problems. And then we talked about the sleep apnea component, but also there are a number of other sleep disorders. So things that are not leading you to feel like you're rested in the morning, like snoring, don't ignore those. Those are things that can be addressed and actually can increase your chances of losing weight. Number 4 is maintaining that regular sleep and wake time, because as we mentioned earlier, your regulation of those processes that actually organize and optimize metabolic hormones like insulin and growth hormone, and those neurologic symptoms like sympathetic systems, like sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, they are directly controlled by when you go to sleep and when you wake up. So keeping those processes regular will accentuate your ability to lose weight or maintain your healthy weight. The 5th one is you must also take a close look at your sleep as a requirement for weight loss. And this is something that was based on that research that was just published last year, that a high quality sleep itself, if your sleep is disturbed at all by snoring, by restlessness, by insomnia, by children, that itself is something you need to fix before you go on a diet or put yourself through a weight loss program, because it's something that will actually help you to lose fat, specifically the fat that's causing disease and also that's causing your weight gain and perpetuating it. The last one is exercise, something that we all add to our diets when we're trying to lose weight oftentimes. But I want you to think about exercise a little bit differently. We often look at it as a way to lose weight. Hey, you got to burn fat. Well, actually, think about exercise as a way to actually sleep better, because it turns out that the immediate effects of exercise are actually to improve your sleep. Your sleep responds to exercise because of adenosine production throughout your metabolic pathways. And it turns out by going into deeper stages of sleep, you stimulate the proper hormone balance and the proper metabolism that will help you to lose weight over time. So look at exercise not as a way to just lose weight, but actually as a way to sleep better. And that means that whatever you do, taking stairs, walking further in the parking lot, those are all things that will help you sleep better, which will help you lose weight in the long run. So look at exercise a little bit differently as you take that forward. We talked a lot about how to improve your sleep, but one of the things that I want to also get across is that if you practice a routine for getting enough sleep and when you sleep, the timing and duration qualities components, you can really focus on habits that will encourage you to do that. And I'm going to give you those in just a second. But if that's not work, maybe that you have an actual quality issue that needs to be addressed. And remember, 80% of people that have a quality issue or a sleep disorder do have that problem without even knowing it. So if you take care of your duration and timing, but you're still having issues, think of it as a quality problem and get to your sleep doctor to get some help. These sleep habits, we've published these out there before. These are based on the best neuroscience we have and cognitive behavioral science that we know. The one thing that I think is most important here is the intention. When you approach change at all, the most important part is your intention to change and the reason for that change. So these are positive daily practices, 10 practices that you can use with your intention to sleep better. First one, make routines around transitions. You get up in the morning, you have a morning routine, I'm sure, most of us do. Do you have an evening transition routine before bed? That's key, getting that transition routine down so that you have time to relax physically and mentally, which are two different ways to relax, is something that you need to think about, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. The second one is to be consistent with time. And I guess you understand now that if you're not consistent with time, it's really hard to lose weight because your weight is predicated on all the metabolism and hormones that are created at night and day and managed by your sleep system. The third one is plan for the sleep you need. In other words, if you don't plan it, it won't happen. So just like you plan for a vacation or for a project, you need to plan for your sleep and make it something that you can succeed at. It's not just something haphazard. The fourth one is exercising. I just mentioned exercise to improve sleep quality. There's a lot of data about that, but I put that as number 4 because we often look at exercise just as a form of weight loss, but really it's about improving quality of your sleep. We all sleep in, and take a look around your bedroom next time you have a chance and look at all the electronics you might have in the bedroom, including TVs, computers, handhelds, even iPhones and Androids. Those are things that you need to remove to create what you really need, which is not a bedroom, but a sleep sanctuary. Make that environment about sleep, not about anything else, not about the day. Make it your nighttime space. And when you do that, you'll remove these things that create daytime function. 6 is remove light from your bedroom. That is the ultimate arbiter of wake and sleep. So if you have light activating your brain at night, you are probably not going to sleep at all as well as you would if that weren't there. Caffeine itself and nicotine are 2 major stimulants of the brain. Caffeine actually lasts for around 6 hours. That's why it says caffeine free times 6. Nicotine, at least 3 hours. So nicotine has a different effect than caffeine, but both of them are very psychoactive and cause wakefulness to really trump any kind of sleep activity. Number 8, minimize your food and alcohol at night. And by that, I don't just mean volume. I also mean, for food in particular, spiciness or complexity or density. So if you eat something heavy and voluminous at night that has lots of spice, it's definitely going to activate the gut nervous system and keep you awake. Same thing's true with alcohol. Alcohol is actually a stimulant in low doses. In higher doses, it's a sedative, but it also impacts your REM and non-REM sleep cycles and reduces your sleep quality. Number 9, physical versus mental wind down. I mentioned this a couple other times. There's a difference between physically relaxing and mentally relaxing. The first is that you definitely, after the end of a long day, need to physically give yourself a chance to kind of relax and get the muscles relaxed. That may be a part of a yoga exercise you do, or even just watching television and laying down to get your body comfortable, getting a back rub, things like that, physical, or a bath, take a bath or a shower. That does help physically, but it's not mental. It doesn't reduce your mind's activity so much as your body's. And that's why there's a real important need for people to use a mental wind down strategy along with their physical wind down strategy, which could be reading. It could be doing a puzzle. It could be quietly listening to something that's surrounding you, like a surround kind of sound for the house, not something that's necessarily music, or even just writing and taking time out to get things out of your head. The last one is just a concept I'd like you to follow. Is basically keep it simple. Follow your plan. Make it something you can do. Even write it down in the beginning and keep it as a plan so that you can be successful. Whatever you do, though, it needs to make sense to you, and it needs to address the issues that we've brought up here. So with that, I know we're over our time a little bit here. I want to thank you for joining us today. And then I'll open it up for any questions we might have. Megan, anybody ask any questions at all? I'm happy to answer.
Sure. We do have a few questions that have come in, Dr. Dermer. And with respect to time, I'm going to take what I think is the most an intriguing question. Is this one? I currently work or have to work evening night shifts. I've been trying to lose weight for over 2 years. Do you think working nights has affected my ability to get a good night's sleep?
Great question, and that's a question that's very relevant for today's discussion. And it's hard to say on any individual basis exactly what's causing your weight gain or difficulty losing weight. So I really can't speak to the individual's personal situation, but in general, what we know is that working on a shift and swapping back and forth between a timing schedule for sleep, day to day or week to week, it's one of the factors that actually increases the chances that you won't lose weight. It stimulates hormones inappropriately and your nervous system inappropriately in a way that you just oftentimes are not able to lose weight. So one of the things I suggest for folks who are on sleep timing schedules that are different than the sort of traditional circadian rhythm is to try to accentuate wake and accentuate sleep as best you can. And by that I mean to use things like light therapy during the day, or your day, quote unquote. So if you're working a night shift and you go to work, think of it very much the same way as if you were working in the daytime. Usually we all get up, have a little routine in the morning, have a little bit of food, and we're off to work. Keep that concept the same when you get up to go to work your night shift. In other words, don't get up in the afternoon and spend hours awake before you go to your night shift. You'll just be sleep deprived by the time you get done. So you're actually causing, a lot of the metabolic changes to be accentuated by sleep deprivation. So get up closer to your actual work time and work that night shift with as much light as you can create in that environment, using a light box or extra lighting itself. You could even use a little caffeine to stimulate wakefulness and reduce sleep itself. And then when you come home in the morning, instead of having bright light in your eyes, I would suggest wearing sunglasses, or even what are these orange glasses out there that are known to block the wavelength of light that actually accentuates wakefulness and causes you to wake up. And that way, when you get home, you can spend a little time with your family, relaxing, wearing your sunglasses, so you're blocking the blue wavelength and green wavelength of light, and get yourself ready for bed. Have your routine set up to go to sleep so that you can wake up closer to your actual work time the next day. That's as good as you can do. As much as you can, keep that schedule the same so your body is able to manage to accommodate. But that's often not the case on the weekends when we try to stay awake at night, stay awake in the daytime and sleep at night. So as much as possible, try to keep your shift about the same on the weekends, just so that you can adapt better and potentially even feel more energized and active during your day, which is where you can actually do exercise and make good food choices.
Thanks for that great information, Dr. Dermer. Like I said before, we do have a few more questions that we're not going to have time to answer. However, we will reach out to you individually to address those. Again, on behalf of our team, we thank you for joining us for our afternoon webinar session. And Dr. Dermer, do you have anything else before we close?
No, I think that this was a lot of information, perhaps at a half hour, but I think that this is a really important topic, because I know that we all want to be fit and trim and be our best selves, but I think one of the keys here is to understand that the normal hormones and normal nervous system activity that actually supports healthy metabolism is really what sleep is all about. And so if you find your sleep is not adequate and you're trying to lose weight, you really should focus on your sleep first, and the exercise aspects will fall in line. So we often think of sleep as the last thing to fix, but it really should be the first when we're looking at weight loss.
Well, thank you all again for joining us, and this presentation will be emailed out to everyone who pre-registered. So thank you again, and have a great day.